All right, we should be getting fired right up here just right away. Uh, it's late tonight. I do realize it. There's just it's been a long day today, but I wanted to get in with an update on Ukraine. It's been a busy New Year's, basically, and it's good to have you here when you guys join in. When you do join in, make sure you hop in and leave a comment so I can know you're here. In the meantime, let's go ahead and get started with the news, really. And this is as of about 2 hour an hour and a half ago. There was already 21 Russian strategic bombers airborne as of about an hour and a half ago, according to Ukraine's Southern Operational Command. So even as I'm doing this stream, the odds are there are cities and towns in Ukraine that are getting plastered with Russian bombs. Not good news, obviously, but it's been a busy one. If you've missed it over this last week, the big news was the fact that the Russians and the Ukrainians have been hitting each other with either air launched cruise missiles or drones. It started off, the big event that started it off was the sinking of the Novocherkassk, which was a Rapucha class landing ship about a week and a half ago now. Then there was, then Russia responded by launching 158 missiles and drones at Ukraine all over the place. They did successfully intercept 114 of them, but still that left 44, I think it was, that ended up hitting their targets. Ukraine responded by a pretty massive drone strike, more than 70 drones, and sent them over into the Russian areas of Moscow, Bryansk, and Belgorod. They did hit a microelectronics plant in Bryansk, and the situation in Belgorod got a lot more interesting, mainly because it initially Russia said, "Oh no, that's not the explosions in Belgorod itself were not arrivals; they were just falling debris from air defense missiles." And then they changed their tune and said, "No, no, 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 no. Ukraine is bombarding the city and killing civilians with these launchers, these Czech-made missile systems." Well, the problem was that the ones they identified only had a 20-kilometer maximum range, so that didn't really fly. And the debris, when they started presenting them, all looked like, well, pieces of S-300 missiles. So that whole situation got really nasty, because then Russia demanded a meeting of the UN Security Council about this horrific terrorist attack, and they accused everybody and their dog and called everybody nasty names, and they said the Chechens must come to this council meeting, and the Chechens said, "Not on your life. We do not respond to demands by you." And it went back and forth for a bit. Well, then Russia launched some more drones at Ukraine and hit Odessa and in particular, but most of those were actually intercepted. So we're going back and forth here. Then, of course, the latest thing is over in Donetsk, the Ukrainians struck the Donbas Palace Hotel. Now, this is after Russia struck Kharkiv and the Kharkiv Hotel, which I don't remember the exact name of right now. But that hotel had some journalists in it, and that was pretty much it. They claimed that there was an intelligence operation in the hotel, that there were 200 mercenaries in the hotel, and yet when all was said and done, the debris showed that they was just a mostly empty hotel, and with some journalists in it. So Ukraine found out about a New Year's party happening in Donbass at this Donbas Palace Hotel, where some apparently high-ranking Russian officials and some were going to be meeting together for their party. So they launched a strike. Now, what makes us think is that that there's more hit than just civilians, which they initially claimed, was the fact that pro-Russian regime channels have been really upset about this attack. Usually when they're really upset, that means that the Ukrainians have hit somebody important. There is an indication that it was a propagandist that was hit, a Russian propagandist. Either way, it's interesting to see going on there. But that's the situation as that goes. Hang on a second for me here. Got to get rid of something. All right. Thank you very much for bearing with me for a moment. Let's flip this back over. Now, if I've got it here, they did say there were some other things that were going on. You can see the Donbass Palace Hotel, top right corner there, was obviously set for a big shindig, indicating that there was some pretty big brass over in that area. Of course, big plume of smoke after these arrivals. This was done late day, I think was the time frame. And of course, videos were starting to come out, though I'm not going to show these specific ones. War Translated, Dmitry at War Translated said that there was this item from a Russian source here talking about the deaths of Russian military correspondents. Now, that was reported by the Russian propagandist Sladkov. Now, I've been tracking the Russian military correspondents quite closely, and most of them are carrying rifles and wearing body armor and participating actively in this operation wherever they are. They might have more flexibility, but when they go there, they're actually taking part in the combat action there. So he translated this as, reporter confirmed dead and another wounded too. The initial absence of deaths in official reports is good, but in my experience, the loss statistics may well change. The recent transformation of casualty statistics after attacks on Belgorod only confirms this practice. One thing is clear, and this is what the Russians said. Ukrainian military deliberately struck peaceful areas of Donetsk. They report that the Donbass Palace Hotel was once again damaged, but there are no military headquarters, no locations of any units, no military commanders living in it. So this whole thing, let's just say it has a bad smell. The Russians have been hitting civilian targets deliberately en masse of this entire last week, and there was clearly some kind of a shindig going on over there at this hotel. I'm not going to justify it. I'm just reporting on the facts as I know it, and they're claiming it was just a reporter. I would like to know the identity and the actions of the person that was in fact killed. Just another report that there was a military correspondent that died. And this video is kind of interesting. Let me kind of get it a little bit bigger here. This is the arrivals, as they call them, the bombs hitting. Let's see, there should be sound. There we go. Is there sound? There we go. This man's walking up to a building, and you can see he's in military fatigues. Well, that's when the arrivals happened. And if you listen carefully, some of those sounded like there were secondary explosions as well, though that could have just been another closely timed strike. So that's kind of what it sounded like at the time. That's what happened in Donetsk, as best information as we have. Now I'm going to move over to a little bit of information about Ukraine's defense industry, comparing it to Russia in this case. And this is from, let's see, former Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba, who is talking about this situation. The defense industry in Russia is government-owned. Under the conditions of authoritarian rule and government control of industry, it's easier to grow the military production. Even while enjoying the status of the most sanctioned country in the world, it is still easier to put your industry in the wartime realm and increase production. Europe clearly has an advantage in its technology. The problem and challenge they face is scaling up that technology's production. I regret to say it, but this will not be enough if the situation does not change, and Russia will be ahead of us. And the truth is that a lot of the EU countries and the US itself have not amped up their production to wartime needs. They are not responding to this as though this is a war. They're acting like we're just, handing over supplies to somebody who's getting all stocked up for the winter or something like that. By and large, that's the downside. The U.S. is not currently, at least from what I've seen, running their artillery manufacturing at full throttle. They're not run. The European Union is not going to make their 1 million artillery shell promise. All of these things are just indications that the Western world has not yet moved up to a wartime production level, one that would allow for the full defeat of Russia. Interesting right here is that Igor Sushko reports that we are likely to see various advanced mid or long-range weapon systems developed domestically in Ukraine that can be used to strike occupied Crimea and Russia. Some of this was already in progress earlier this year, as he reports. So the advantage of producing these things locally is that they will not be under the restrictions that Western powers have been putting on the use of their weapons. So if they build it, nobody is going to be able to tell them that they can't launch it at Moscow or someplace in Crimea, the Crimean Bridge. There's nothing to stop them because they produced it locally. And that's kind of what I think they're aiming for there. I'm going to take a brief pause before moving into the Ukraine news. If you've just tuned in, I would be happy to see your comment real quick. If you have a question, absolutely let me know. I've just gotten kind of things back together after a bunch of changes in here in my office / recording area here. So I'm using the green screen right now. So at least it's not, so I'm not blocking so much of the screen. All right, let's go ahead and move over to Ukraine news. As of today, Russia launched drones over Ukraine. The air defense forces were active in the Kyiv region as reported by local authorities. And there is no vacation during wartime. There we go. This is the aftermath of the Russian attack on Odessa during the New Year's Eve celebrations. I did see some video of people in Odessa singing the Red Verbenum, I guess is the song. It's a traditional Ukrainian song, and it just shows that they are not going to be cowed by Russia's just constant attacks. That said, I might have this later, but my recollection is that out of 90 drones sent on New Year's Eve, Ukraine managed to shoot down 87. There we go. Ukraine's air defense makes record interception of 90 drone Russian attack on New Year's Eve. The overall reports here, the numbers kept flipping around, but the numbers I saw most commonly were 87 and 90. So that was like a 96% interception rate, just with the back of napkin quick math. Over in Lviv, a drone hit a museum. This is the Roman Shuchech. Oh man, apologize for that pronunciation. Roman Shuchech Museum, who is a prominent Ukrainian political and military figure. That almost seems targeted, because why would they hit something like that? That's going towards eliminating the culture of Ukraine. And this one's a super interesting little video right here. I want to play this for you, and we'll probably go through it a couple of times. This is a Sea Baby drone manufactured by Ukraine. And as you see there's those missiles going out from them. These are the same missiles, as I understand it, as the TOS-1 thermobaric missiles that Russia uses. And Ukraine also has a stockpile of. Now, they could also be Grad missiles, a possibility there, but this is the type of thing we're starting to see from Ukraine. Could you imagine being in a Russian naval vessel? You see a drone coming, you start training your guns on it and start opening fire, then all of a sudden it starts launching rockets at you? This is a definite escalation in the sea war in the Black Sea. President Zelensky's New Year's message included this phrase: Ukraine is alive. Ukraine lives. Ukraine is fighting and fighting. Ukraine has become stronger. And if you look at Ukraine at the start of this war, every Western intelligence outfit, and probably Russians as well, expected Ukraine's military to fold like a cheap suit, absolutely to collapse in on itself like a Jenga tower. And in the end, however, they fought back, and with whatever they had, whatever little they had, and they managed to kick the Russians out of Hostomel. They managed to kick the Russians out of Kiev. They managed to kick the Russians out of Kharkiv. They managed to kick the Russians out of Kherson. They have managed to kick the Russians back. Now they're in the Ukrainians are much stronger, but so are, to a certain extent, the Russians, in the sense that the Russian military, even though it is worse trained than the one they started the operation with, it is a much larger force now, comparatively speaking. Hence why all the meat wave attacks. But this is just a message that says that Ukraine is getting stronger and is fighting harder because they believe in the freedom of Ukraine. Here's the 87 number. The Defense of Ukraine reports 87 out of 90 Shahed drones were shot down on New Year's Eve. This is somebody else talking about these Sea Baby drones. This time, Noel reports, and they didn't give a long analysis of it, but it shows that they actually said it was demonstrated in Sevastopol. So these drones are out there; they're actively being used. And again, as I was putting things together earlier, this was earlier today. Russian strategic bombers were in the air, and let's see, Kiev time, 4:30 a.m. Apparently, I can't type today. 7:11 a.m. So this is probably either finished by now or still in operation right now. Russia is throwing everything they can at Ukraine right now, everything they've got available. Brief pause. Any questions before I move on to news out of Russia? Let me get my screen ready here. I always do these live streams pretty much by the seat of my pants. You'll see whatever's on my screen in that regard. And hi, Kazman, glad to see you. Thank you very much. Yes, it's very late, and I just want to get this. I felt I needed to get this information out there with the Donetsk hotel attack, with all the missile strikes each way. And wanted to get it done because I did not want to wait till tomorrow and just end up having everything buried from New Year's. I'm trying to make it so these things happen at a more reasonable time and a more reliable time, but it depends on what's going on during the day. So I do appreciate you showing up even when I'm showing up at midnight your time. All right, so let's go ahead and move on here. Wrong side. There we go. From the Institute for the Study of War, we're talking about Russia news now. Let's see, this is not what I want to talk about. This is what I want to talk about here. Russian President Vladimir Putin used his annual New Year's address on December 31st to concretize Russian ideological priorities for 2024. He didn't talk about the special military operation /war, but he focused on setting up the ideological conditions, talking about how the Russian military was fighting for truth and justice, and focused on family, the year of the family and the family unit and national unity. This is an interesting direction to take his rhetoric, mainly because if the special military operation /war was going well, he wouldn't stop talking about it. It's that simple. And so therefore, I wonder just exactly how well it's going for them over there. Probably not as well as they want you to think. He did promise today, in today's address, to intensify attacks on Ukraine in response to the Belgorod strike. Again, the Belgorod strike, if you weren't here for it earlier, was when Ukraine sent a bunch of drones into the border areas of Russia and struck military targets in there. And then, of course, Russia launched air defense missiles, which they said the debris of fell onto Belgorod, causing significant casualties. Not a lot of damage, though. Burning cars, no real impact craters or anything, etc. So anyway, Russian President Vladimir Putin has vowed to intensify their attacks on Ukraine, saying that the Ukrainians want to scare us and create uncertainty within our country. No crime against civilians, he says, will remain unpunished. That's something that Ukraine has already been saying. Let's see, skip on past that. There we go. This is an interesting little bit of a story here. A Russian soldier has refused to go to Ukraine, and he has been sentenced to 2.3 years in a penal colony. So this talks about the wife and, of course, telling her children what was going on, why he refused to go to the war in Ukraine, and that their sons would be without their father for 2.3 years. The youngest ones were told that, of course, he was just on a business trip. I hope this gets followed up on as time goes on. This is the type of thing that tells me that the Russian public is starting to see what's really going on in the war, and they're not on board. At least not all of them. A hangar with diesel fuel was on fire in Moscow. Now, another source says that this fire was started by partisan actors. That indicates to me, at least, that the war is being brought into Russia. During the New Year's Eve celebrations, a raid on migrants was carried out in St. Petersburg, with at least 50 people detained, having to provide their papers, and they were told that this was done in order to just check if any of these people had, warrants for their arrest or other legal issues that they needed to be followed up on. This is basically press gang work here. They're clearly looking for anybody they can press gang into the special military operation /war. And these opportunities they're taking really does suppress any indications that there's actual freedom in Russia. Sergei Lavrov declared that there were more than 200 Ukrainian military personnel already imprisoned in Russia. In other words, ones they claim had committed some kind of crime and therefore were put into prison. They do also say they have opened over 4,000 criminal cases against approximately 900 people. Now, as I understand, that's also basically a violation of the laws of war and the Geneva Convention, but I don't think Russia cares about that. Really cold weather in Moscow. Apparently, they're looking at -11 to -13 degrees Celsius, well below freezing. So that's good, with temperatures expected to get as low as -20 this week. So expect to hear about a lot of freezing weather in Russia. Russian citizens are no longer considering Crimea as a territory they want to live in. Since August 22, according to Rafat Shubarov of the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people, when attacks began on military targets in Crimea, the first strikes were at the Novofedorovka airfield near the city of Saki. Then those who settled in Crimea experienced a shock, and some of the people urgently left Crimea. The main trend for us is that the demand for real estate has fallen sharply. Crimea is no longer considered by Russian citizens as a territory where they would like to live, where they would feel safe. And since it's not their territory, I can't imagine why they shouldn't feel secure there. Here's the information about the partisans setting fire to that diesel fuel in Moscow as well. I knew I had it in here somewhere. I'm going to move on to international news real quick here and get that done. I don't have a ton more to go through, so we're moving right along here. This will be a little bit of a shorter stream today. Norway has announced that they're going to permit weapons and defense equipment to be sold directly to Ukraine. That takes out a lot of the hassle of trying to get that equipment now. And Norway is now on board with providing that equipment directly. So that took effect today. I added this one because I mentioned in another video, the one on Geopolitics Daily, that the Russians are working to cause chaos and divorce France from Ukraine. Well, on New Year's Eve, 745 cars were set on fire and 389 people were arrested for participating in these disturbances. I wonder how much of this was agitated by Russian operatives. I don't know, but that was my first thought. Another one that's not directly related to the war here. Waves of 5 meters high have hit Japan. They had a 7.6 magnitude earthquake with the epicenter in Ishikawa. That's an enormous earthquake, and they did expect to have some tsunami effects from it. The reason I'm bringing it up is because Japan has been getting on board with supporting Ukraine lately, and so this might divert some of that attention as well. Another thing that might divert attention is U.S. Navy helicopters sinking Houthi boats in the Red Sea after they attempted to hijack a merchant ship. This is another one of those situations where resources are being spent elsewhere and not going to Ukraine in this case. There are needs there, and I'm not saying otherwise. I'm just saying that this is one more item that's showing how hazardous our world is right now. It may not be a good time to take that vacation. I'm just saying across overseas if you live in the U.S. China's Xi Jinping has declared that China's reunification with Taiwan is inevitable. And this one really is just one more indication of the hostile environment that we have going on in the world and how resources are having to be spread a lot thinner than they would have if we had taken this all taken care of early on. That said, I do want to point out something about the history there. China's legitimate government actually fled to Taiwan when it was overthrown by Chiang Kai-shek. And therefore, if you think about this slightly differently, the valid, legitimate government for China is in Taiwan. And if you tell that to Xi Jinping, I can't imagine he would be delighted with the historical context of that right there. Personal opinion, but just wanted to point it out. Now let's get back to some more Ukraine stuff. The Anton Herashchenko talks about the Norwegians providing that direct assistance with military hardware. And the Norwegians stated that it's in the extraordinary security situation resulting from Russia's war of aggression. It is crucial that we continue to support Ukraine. Norway's already provided over Norwegian kroner 11 billion in military support. This is another one that caught me off guard. India apparently supplied Ukraine with 155 millimeter artillery shells. Just the other day, India was talking about how their relationship with Russia was robust and in good condition. I wonder if these went through a third party to get to where they are here, or if this was direct assistance. Because how it got there could have a very different interpretation. And Canada is going to apply another NASAMS air defense system, including missiles, to Ukraine. That was released by President Zelensky, and they need everyone they can get. Brief pause here before I get to the front lines. Not a lot there, but just a brief pause here. How are you guys doing tonight? And I do see you still there, Casman, so I appreciate it. Anybody else who's on board, absolutely chime in real quick. Let me know how you're doing today, and if you have any questions. I'll be watching for them and reading them. Okay, here we go. Let's go ahead and move on to the situation on the front lines. Oops, get that back over there. A Russian Zala drone, basically the Russians managed to find a HIMARS launcher finally, and they flew a drone around it, keeping an eye on it. Well, the HIMARS launcher moved, and the Russians apparently launched a Smerch in that general direction and totally missed the HIMARS launcher. Yes, Dad. Yes, Jerry. I do realize it is late. I'm just had to get this done tonight. Otherwise, I just would not have felt right finishing off the day. But I do appreciate you stopping in. So thank you. So they launched a Smerch missile into that general area and missed. How the two things that are concerning here is that Russia was able to fly a Zala drone around it unhindered without being shot down by an air defense system, and that Russia is really stupid and didn't manage to actually hit such a large target. Overall situation on the front lines, there's been some clarifications and updates here. Not a lot here, so don't expect a ton of changes here. The Russians managed to, well, not so much. The gray zone was expanded here north of Kurdyumivka. The Russians are probably fighting in this area. We know they've been working on this Klishchiivka hook right up here pretty heavily. But otherwise, no major change. There's also something near Berdichi here, which I'm sure I just butchered the pronunciation. Berdichi is near Stepova here. And you can see that the Russians have been expanding this front area right here. I think the intention here is to try and spread out Ukraine's troops enough that the Russian quantity can finally be used to punch through the lines. Good morning, Ruth. Glad to have you here. And from Greece even. That's got to be probably your normal waking up time about now, I'd guess. For those of us over here in the U.S., it's probably time I should be in bed, but I wanted to get this done today. Thank you for joining me. This is more pictures off of the Lviv missile attack that hit a museum and a university in the area. A lot of it's really getting to be a struggle over there at times. The situation in Bakhmut-Bodanivka, we just talked about just briefly here. There is reports that the Russians have broken through on the primary defense lines north of Bodanivka. So keep an eye on, this is an area to keep a close eye on and see if the Russians manage to take advantage of that change. Also from null reports, in fact, let me just kind of move the zoom down a notch here. Robotna-Verbova axis, it looks like Russia managed to capture a little bit more territory here. Again, this is open area, but it's area that Ukraine had managed to capture during the summer offensive. And now the Russians are retaking some of that land. And I just want to share this real quick. This is what Avdiivka looks like now. This is what it looks like when the Russian world comes and you say you aren't really interested. They flatten the place and destroy everything in their path. Now I got a couple of extras for you today. Some of them might be a little bit rough here. Let me bring this down a notch so you can see this better. This Christmas tree near Ukrainian positions in Konstantinivka is close to Bakhmut, and it's made up entirely of the belongings of killed and wounded Ukrainian warriors instead of toys. Just a reminder that there is a tremendous human cost for freedom. The Ukrainians are fighting for their freedom, and they lay down their lives to try and stop the Russians from taking away those freedoms. Garry Kasparov, he is a world chess champion. In fact, he's formerly Russian. He got out of the area. We know that for sure. He says, "You are certain to lose a war you refuse to admit you are in." Putin began his assault on the Western democratic order while still a member of the G7. What started with election interference and corruption is now open warfare, but Europe is still in denial. And the longer Europe and the U.S. deny it, the more likely the Ukrainians are to lose, because they won't have the support they need when they truly, desperately need it. I'm going to end off with this video. This lady is quite the jump roper here. The thing that you may not see there is that one of her legs is false. And let me see if I can pull this back to the beginning here without putting a whole lot of music up. This is her jump roping before she lost her leg. Now you might ask, how did she lose her leg? Well, she volunteered for the military, and they were going to put her behind a desk somewhere. But she said that she wanted to be part of liberating her own country, fighting for freedom. So she was sent to the front as a communications operator, during which she lost her leg. And now she's back to jump roping again. You can see that the false leg is, it's dead weight right there. But the fact that she is dedicating herself to recovering the capability she had is a tremendous amount of willpower, and desire to overcome, even in the face of adversity. And that's everything for today. Thank you for joining me. Is there any questions before I close up here and call it a night? If so, chime in real quick here. I will be watching for it real fast. A lot of what is going on over there is heartbreaking. It really is. And the fact is that Vladimir Putin cannot afford to lose. He has put everything on the line in Ukraine. So no, he doesn't want to talk except for to get a brief period of respite so he can rearm and continue. If he and his military go home now without a flag of victory, there will be heads rolling. They have spent too much to stop now. And the problem is that it's going to take their utter and complete defeat at the hands of Ukrainian forces for them to truly understand that they cannot win this war. Jason J. Smart and Chuck Farrer had actually written an analysis of the war, saying that Russia is losing, not winning. And the reason they say this is because a lot of what's going on is about forming and forcing a perception that Russia is inevitable, that they cannot be defeated, that they are winning on the battlefield. And this disinformation is being used on a constant basis to try and basically put the wind up the world. One of their goals is to prove that the United States does not have the ability or willpower to stop them anymore. And the question really is he right? I think that the American people, if they know the information, if they are told what's at stake, will fully support Ukraine. Not necessarily sending our troops, but sending our equipment and our knowledge and our expertise and the abilities that we provide. But nobody in power has effectively done that communication. But that's just my opinion. I'm not seeing any questions at this point, so thank you very much again for joining me. I'm going to go ahead and sign off for tonight. We'll see you guys tomorrow then. You have a great rest of your day. Well, or great sleeping time. Whatever floats your boat.